Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Gript Media. This is John McGuirk with the latest in the series of interviews I'm doing with the candidates seeking your vote for the European elections on June the 7th. We're staying in the Ireland South constituency for this latest episode, and we're going to talk to somebody who is the leader of a political party running three candidates, one in each constituency. He is leader of Ireland First, and his name is Derek Blighe. Derek, thanks a million for joining us, and welcome.
Thanks for having me on, John.
So first of all, you guys are running three candidates. There's yourself in Ireland South. There is Margaret Alacoque McGuire in Ireland Northwest, and there's Philip Dwyer in Dublin. Is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, so I suppose you can answer this question on behalf of all three of you. So, because this is the question I start with everybody. In your constituency in Ireland South, Derek, there's 23 people seeking people's votes. The latest opinion polls at the weekend showed that you're on a very, I have to say, a very credible and I'd say surprising a lot of people, 4%. But if you want to get elected, you're probably going to have to double that over the next 3 weeks. So why should people vote for you and not any of the other 22?
Because I think that people want somebody who's going to be decisive right at the moment. People are sick and tired of the usual, flip-flopping from politicians. Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, Sinn Féin, the Greens will jump on an issue depending on which way the wind is blowing. Immigration is a huge issue at the moment, and as you know, Ireland First have been rock solid on the issue since the beginning. People know that we will fight the Irish people's corner and vote only in the interests of Irish people, not vote to get a pat in the head from the EU overlords for voting away our sovereignty. The EU Migration Pact is a perfect example. Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael MEPs voted to opt in to all 10 texts, with Sinn Féin flopping and voting out of some, feeling the way the wind is blowing it as usual. This pact will wipe away the last remaining self-governance with regards to immigration. We'll be told how many migrants we can take. We'll be told what is a safe country and what isn't a safe country. And if people vote for Ireland First, they will get MEPs who will only vote in the interests of Irish people and for the nation of Ireland.
All right. Well, let's say they do. Let's say they elect three Ireland First MEPs, which they have the chance to do so on June the 7th, if they so wish. Obviously, the three of you head over there, one of you, two of you, three, head over there to Brussels. Who are you going to be working with? Because, as I've said to every candidate so far, there's obviously going to be there's a range of groups in the European Parliament. You're not, three people on their own ain't going to get anything done. Excuse me, ain't going to get anything done. You're going to need to partner with somebody from some of the groups. I assume you won't be joining the socialists.
No. Look, there's two groups at the moment, John, with the ECR and with the ID group. We're expecting a bit of a merger, I think, right after this round of elections. There's some talks that, they might form
a sort of super group.
A type of a coalition, maybe. We haven't decided yet, right, who we'll go with, but the ID and the ECR groups would definitely be closest to who we are right, at the moment. But we'll see how we get on June 7th, and we'll.
All right, yeah. I want to turn to this business of June the 7th. I'm going to ask you two sort of process questions before we get into the policy, because I was reading your policies on your website there, and I listened to your answer about why people should vote for you, and it strikes me that between yourselves and the Irish Freedom Party, and Herman Kelly was on here last week, your policies are almost identical, and maybe you can enlighten me to where the differences are. But you both skeptical of the green agenda, both broadly Eurosceptical, both very committed to neutrality, both very big on immigration. There's not a whole lot of difference between you. I saw last week you were tweeting that people should vote for you one and the IFP two, and indeed Michael Leahy, the candidate for the Irish Freedom Party, was saying the reverse. Like, you're on 4% in these opinion polls, but as things stand, it's very likely that the whole range of other candidates that are running there could cost people of your view a seat in these elections. So why haven't you merged? Why are there two parties saying basically the same thing? And like without attacking them, I'm not trying to pitch against each other, but like what's the story there? And a lot of people be interested in that. What is the difference between yourself and Herman Kelly?
The difference between myself and Herman basically is Derek and Herman. Um, the Irish Freedom Party, they advocate to leave the EU.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that's their stance. They want out. We're not calling to leave it. We want to reform our position within the EU. We saw what happened with Greece a few years ago. Greece was talking about leaving, and they found themselves in all kinds of difficulty. Um, with 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 the size of a country we are, right, with 14 MEPs, with a minority say, right, in Europe, we don't think that leaving now, right, is the solution. But we would like to go back to 1972, the 1972 agreement, where Ireland actually joined a trading bloc. What we have these days is something completely different. Um, the the reason why we haven't um, formed a coalition of such, well, we kind of have, because Michael Leahy will vote for me. I will vote for Michael Leahy. Herman Kelly will vote for Margaret McGuirk. And if I get a seat right in the south, and Herman gets a seat in the northwest, and Philip Dwyer gets a seat in Dublin, then I hope we'll work together. We we have had talks, and we have agreed that we will work together at EU level, but also at local election level.
Okay, how many local election candidates are you guys running, by the way, just in case I couldn't interview every local election candidate who would be here to December, but I presume you're running 20 or 30 people around the country. Is that it?
No, at the moment, no. It's changing every day. We're at about 10 or 11 at the moment, I think.
Okay. All right.
But
All right.
We won't be taking on any more.
I want to. I think the nominations closed just the day we're doing this interview, actually. So, in fairness, and I know, every party, even Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, in fairness, are scrambling to get candidates at the last minute. Look, I'm going to address the elephant in the room here with regard to you, which is what the rest of the media say about you. So, there's an article Barry Roach wrote in the Irish Times, the 11th of March, 2023. Big picture you, it says, the making of a far-right agitator from Irish immigrant to anti-refugee extremist. So it says you're far-right and an anti-refugee extremist. So I have two questions for you on that. First of all, are you far-right? And secondly, if you're not, what would be far-right? What are they mistaking you for? And are they mistaken? Maybe it's a label you embrace. What's your reaction to that? Because every media outlet describes you that way.
We ask this question all the time, John. What is far right? Okay, and we cannot get a definition, right, of what it is. I've had conversations with people on it, and my understanding of it is left and right. Basically, if you break it down, is the level of state interference, right, in a society. The further left you move, the more state interference. The further right you move, the less state interference. So my understanding of it would be far right. The furthest right you could go would be anarchy, would be no government, fend for yourself. That's absolutely not right. What I advocate for smaller government, less government interference, lower taxes, less restrictions on your freedom. We saw what happened a few years ago with COVID, right, when the government decided, right, on a whim that they would shut the country down, stop every man and woman going to work and put the entire country on super dole,
You
right?
were
And
you were
nowhere,
you were very prominent, of course, in the anti-COVID, not the anti-COVID, the anti-lockdown sort of protest movement and all of that. Is that what sort of sparked your interest in sort of political activism as opposed to just being, yeah? And I'm not demeaning this. I am an online writer myself, but you were kind
yeah,
of an online presence before that.
yeah.
Was that what sparked the interest, or was it immigration, or what
Yeah,
was?
the idea, right, that the Irish government could, on a whim, it was a Friday afternoon, I think I remembered. I was just back from work, and Leo Varadkar was on the telly, and he said, right, that the country was going into lockdown for 2 weeks, or no,
He was
was
in
it for a
Washington.
week?
He was in Washington. He shut the schools. I remember it vividly.
Yeah,
He
yeah,
was actually it was around St. Patrick's Day.
yeah. Right, at the time, right, data, right, was coming out of Italy that the people who were affected by COVID were the very elderly and the infirm. All right. And I remember thinking to myself, why aren't, they considering all the options? Why are they going with the most extreme solution here, right? And putting the country on lockdown. I was shocked by that. And yeah, I decided with Philip Dwyer, right, and with a few others to, break the rules, meet up every week or every 2 weeks, walk with others and talk and try to discuss, you know, what was going on in our country and maybe try to push back against it. But going back to your original question about whether or not I'm far right or whatever, no, no, I'm right of centre, but I think my way of thinking and the policies that I would support would be common sense.
All right.
They would support people who work hard, who enjoy their family life, right? Who enjoy their country, and they want a level of freedom, right? And not have their society destroyed by absolutely crazy government policies.
All right.
You
Well,
know,
let's go through a few policies. Obviously, I think, in fairness, you've made immigration the center plank of your campaign. I don't think you do dispute that with me.
yeah.
First of all, what can you do if you're elected to the EU Parliament to sort of impact that? And secondly, you're obviously standing in an election with a view to standing candidates in general election. But what domestic policy changes do you guys want to see? And can you lay them out for me, and then we'll have a chat about them.
Um, Border security would be the first. Uh, would be one of the main ones. We need to control who's coming into our country. We need to restrict the ones who are not genuine. We need to restrict the ones who are coming here for the wrong reasons. We need to restrict the ones who are coming here without documentation. That's an absolute must. We need to stop making Ireland an attractive country to come to for people who want to come here for the wrong reason.
Right, but
Um,
I actually have a piece on this for Gript. It'll be out before this interview is out. But saying that in terms of obviously incentives to come here is a big reason. The government,
mhm,
as I think a lot of people would agree, the government has made it attractive for people to come here, more attractive, say, than it is in France or Germany or a lot of other countries. What would you
yeah.
do specifically to make it less attractive?
Well, the welfare that was offered, right, would be a first anyway. You can't offer attractive welfare packages, right, for people to come here, right, and then allow them to sit on their backside for 10 years. Take Joseph Puska, for example. He came here, whatever year it was, he worked for a wet week, he hurt his back, and then he sit on his backside for 10 years, and then he did what he did, which was absolutely atrocious. Um,
Well, he was now, the government would say, he'd say he's from Slovakia, which is an EU member state, and he came here perfectly legally as anyone, as
Mm.
I can, you or I can go and live in Croatia tomorrow, for example, or
Mm.
Hungary as EU member. Like, are you saying you would restrict EU freedom of movement? And if so, I mean, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but what can
No.
the government do that's not doing at the moment?
Well, he came here and he sat on welfare for 10 years. Should we be okay with people coming here from EU states who have absolutely no intention to work, who may have committed heinous crimes in another country? Should we have an open border for people who may commit the same crimes here? The least we can do, the very, very least we can do is um, reform our welfare policy and do a background check, right, on people coming into the country.
All right.
We don't seem to be doing that effectively at the moment.
Hmm.
And the evidence is that um, the government is now talking, right, about cutting the welfare rates for Ukrainians. And lo and behold, many of them are leaving. So if they needed to be here so badly, why don't they stay here with lower levels of welfare?
I'm
Why are they
interested.
now deciding to up and leave?
I'm interested in a bigger picture policy you have on your website in relation to immigration. You say, and I'm going to read it to you. We believe that the non-Irish population should never have exceeded 10%, but due to government corruption has been allowed to. We will deport all those who have entered the state illegally. So I have two
Mm.
questions for you on that. The first one is, and in fairness, you're not committing to reducing the population back down to 10% in that statement. It will be quite difficult. I think it's at 20% at the moment. You'd have to deport a lot of people who've been living here for a
Yeah,
long time legally. So is
yeah.
that something you'd aim to do? And if so, do you have any empathy for those who are not sorry, empathy is the wrong word. Do you have any allowance for those who are living here, for example, and who have kids maybe born in Ireland who are now in secondary school who speak English with an Irish accent? In other words, is this a case of shutting the door now, or would you actually try and reverse some of the migration that's already happened, say from Poland, Czechoslovakia, Eastern Europe?
The first thing we need to do is we need to put measures in at the border now. We need to slow the numbers, right, who are coming into the country. The next thing I would do when I speak about mass deportations, what I'm speaking about is if you came into this country and broke our law, either after entry or in the process of entering the country, you need to be deported. No questions asked. When I went to Canada, there was absolutely no question. If you broke the law on the way in or while you were in Canada, when you were at a particular level or stage of your immigration process, you were out the door. So if you came to this country in the last few decades and broke the law, you came in without documentation, you had committed a crime before you entered, a crime serious enough that would have had an impact on your gaining residence in Ireland, then absolutely you need to leave the country. We actually had a referendum in 2004, I believe it was,
The
right,
birth the
about
birthright says,
citizenship.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. We hear TDs at the moment calling for um, a referendum on immigration.
Hmm.
As far as I'm concerned, that was the closest you were going to get. And we had it in 2004. And the basic question was, should we give an Irish passport to somebody who was born here that doesn't have an Irish parent? That was kind of it in a nutshell.
Mm.
And 79.1% of the population, I think it was 79.1, voted no. Absolutely no.
Yeah, but the
Um,
flip side of that, Derek, and I'm just
mm,
playing devil's advocate here to have the conversation.
yeah,
But like the flip side to that is that there are a lot of kids who maybe have been born here since maybe the parents, for example, of the kids of perhaps EU citizens who came here legally,
Mm,
who were born here since 2004. If you were born in 2004, you're 20 now. So you were,
yeah.
say, born 2005, you're a 19-year-old kid. You've only ever lived in Ireland. You've spoken the language. You know, your grandparents live in Tallinn in Estonia, but you're
Mm,
Irish. You play Gaelic, you're just gone to UCD, and then you're caught with possession of, I don't know, cannabis or something like that.
mm.
Would you send that kid back to Estonia, or is that an unfair characterization of your position? And if it is, it is. I'm just asking.
That's not fair, no, because that person is coming from an EU country,
Okay,
so
so you're making that
it's different.
distinction. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
fair.
yeah. If you're coming from outside the EU, is right is what I'm focusing on,
Oh,
mainly. Right, even if the parents um came here 20 years ago, a child was born here, but that constitutional that referendum was they went against it, then
mm.
absolutely I would advocate to remove those people from the country.
Uh,
We,
uh,
we've got huge numbers, right, of foreign nationals in the country. Right, we're not against immigration. We're for sensible levels of immigration. We're for immigration that benefits the country. What we're seeing as of late, right, is immigration that has absolutely no benefit. We've got asylum seekers sleeping on tents, right, at the canal in Dublin. We've got Irish people here, right, who've been on housing lists for for decades, right, in some cases. And there's people coming into the country a wet week. They're being allocated social housing. I actually was in an estate tonight where it had happened. There was a family, I believe, from Sri Lanka who were just in the country a few months, were living in a council house. Meanwhile, there was a family across the road whose daughter was 34, I believe, with two young kids, had been on the council list for 14 years or something, and they absolutely couldn't understand it. This isn't an isolated case. This is literally every single night that I go out knocking on doors. It's the same story. People are extremely frustrated at what's going on.
okay. Look, let's move on and talk about some other issues before we
Yeah,
run out of time. Ireland South's obviously a massive farming constituency. I live in it myself.
yeah.
Big dairy farming in particularly North Cork, Tipperary, places like that. Dairy farming is coming under pressure with EU legislation and all the rest of it. I think it's fairly clear you oppose a lot of that sort of climate legislation that seeks to reduce
Mhm.
herd sizes and all the rest of it. But I'll ask you the question in a slightly different way, though. Is there things that dairy farmers aren't doing now that they need to be doing to improve the state of the environment? Or are you just 100% with them the whole way?
Look, we advocate for looking after our environments. Okay, we don't want farmers dumping, you know, their slurry tanks into the water. We
Mhm.
absolutely advocate for clean farming, but the CO2 alarmism that um, the Irish government have been involved in for the last few decades, it's absolutely damaging to farmers. We've got some of the finest soil on the planet. We can produce the finest food on the planet. We can produce enough food here to feed 9 Irelands. You know, spuds, for example. When I was a young fella, there used to be spud fields everywhere. I used to
Mhm.
go picking spuds. Now you can barely find potatoes anywhere. We've dairy, right, and we've beef farmers. You know,
You know, it's interesting. I come from a farming background myself, and my father would say that when he was growing up, there was a lot more crop rotation. You had corn in one field, barley in another, flax in
mhm.
another. His father farmed chickens, pigs, everything. Now, almost every farmer is doing the one thing. It's either beef or dairy or maybe some sheep.
Yeah,
Do you think there
yeah,
is a case? Do you think there's a case? Do you think there's a case for maybe encouraging more diversification in our agricultural sector?
100%, 100%. And you know what? The the farming subject would probably be our weakest subject. Okay, I'm not going around the place claiming to be right, an expert on farming, but we want to sit down with farmers. That's the difference. We actually want to sit down with farmers and we want to write, right, our farming policies based on what farmers tell us and what's good for farmers. CO2 alarmism, okay, this idea that the world is going to end in the next 5 years. Oh no, actually it's the next 5 years. Oh no, it's the next 5 years. It's getting tiring. Farmers are not the problem. Um, you know,
What is the
we're
problem?
tiny.
So like I note you guys are in you mentioned CO2 alarmism, but I think you're also against the opening of more data centers in Ireland. Did I read that right?
Yeah, yeah, we'd be against uh just because of the amount the levels of electricity they use. Like we've got some of the highest electricity costs in the world. We're putting wind farms all over the country. We're shutting down our peak production power plants, right? And meanwhile, we can build these centers that use absolutely huge levels of electricity. Meanwhile, we've got 80-year-old pensioners who can barely afford to keep the lights on at night.
The
So,
green, the green, the gre- the Greens obviously have shut down or are in the process of seeking to shut down the natural gas terminal over
yeah.
in Clare, which is at the Foynes port, which has obviously been a massive
Mhm.
issue for people in that part of your constituency.
Mhm.
Do you have any issue with fracked gas coming in from Pennsylvania and Montana?
Um, that's a discussion. We have gas here. Why can't we open up our own gas fields here?
Mhm.
Why can't we drill our own fields here? Do we need to import it from the US? Is that essential?
Well, I suppose that's a question for you. You guys, you're the candidates running. I'm not going to answer it, but like
Yeah,
it
yeah,
is,
but
yeah. It's just it's an issue because there's lots of people over there in Foynes I know who are particularly upset that they see a lot of jobs going from the area, a lot of traffic going from the area because they say, look, we need this gas. The Americans are willing to sell it to us. It's cheaper than what we're buying from elsewhere. Reduce
yeah,
energy costs, bring it in. Anyway, look,
yeah,
let's talk a little bit about foreign policy. It's actually one of the things as an MEP where you're going to be making a lot of decisions over the next 5 years if you're elected is in
yeah,
relation to sort of foreign and security policy for the European Union. There's really three big issues on that at the moment. The first one obviously is the conflict on the edge of Europe, which is what's going on between Russia and Ukraine. I've asked everyone this
mhm,
question. The outgoing parliament recently voted 50 billion in military aid to Ukraine to stop Russia invading. The case that the Europeans leadership makes is that were we to not do that and were the Russian armies to crash through and take over all of Ukraine, number one, it would embolden Vladimir Putin. And number two, it might send another 5 or 10 million Ukrainians fleeing across the borders into Europe. Do you think there's any merit to that? And if further discussion and military aid or money that's going to be used to buy weapons for Ukraine comes up in the parliament, what will you be saying?
military aid, no, absolutely no. I would vote against it. Humanitarian aid, um, perhaps, but for right the region that is affected. People forget that right the war is in a small corner of Ukraine. Most of the country is safe. Meanwhile, we've taken hundreds of thousands here to this country. There's millions around Europe, and um, I think it's another case of um, alarmism, Ukraine war alarmism. Um, you know, the we're spending €1 million a month, right, on Ukrainian pets. From the beginning, I advocated to look at this with a level head. We should have had a national conversation on the numbers we were able to take, not decide to take over 100,000 and then say, "Oh, hang on, how do we deal with this now?" Um,
Well,
Many Ukrainians, yeah,
if I'm listening to you correctly, you're saying that, there might have been a case for taking 20, 30, 40, 50,000, but not, so you're not saying absolutely none, like some of your opponents do.
no, not 100%. If it was back in the day, in the early days, I actually called Fine Gael TD David Stanton. He's in my local area here for East Cork. And I actually advocated, I said, why don't we take a sane number? 5, 10, maybe 15,000. Right? At the time, I think we had about 8,000 homeless people. But
Mhm.
if we knuckle down, we could have taken, a reasonable number. But, the Irish government threw out numbers like 100,000, 200,000, or an uncapped number. It
200,000,
was
200,000, I think was what they said they would take. And now obviously they're struggling with less than half that. So your point is well made on that one. Let's move on to the other major war going on in the world at the moment. Now, there's no military aid going from the EU to the Middle East,
mhm.
at least at EU level. I think the British and Germans both separately supply weapons to Israel. But the Irish government at the moment is saying it will recognize a Palestinian state. The Israeli government says that's a terrible idea. The American government says that's a terrible idea. A lot of people on the left say it's a wonderful idea. Where do you stand on it? You don't need to take a long time to answer it, but just that some voters seem interested. So,
Yeah, why are we focusing on countries halfway across the world when we have chaos here? We seem as a country now, right, to be more interested in, the goings on in every other state than the goings on here. The war in Ukraine, it's tragic. The loss of lives are tragic. The war in Gaza is absolutely tragic. I absolutely condemn Hamas for their attacks in October, and I absolutely condemn Israel for the killing of innocent Palestinians. We've got serious problems here at the moment. This isn't really a conversation that, we can spend weeks and months um, talking about. We've got there's chaos in our streets, there's chaos in our schools, there's chaos in our health service, there's chaos, right, in our housing situation. Um, you know, every time a conflict starts halfway across the world, why do we look that way? Why don't we say, you know what? That's halfway across the world. There's not a whole lot we can do, bar broker peace talks, send peacekeeping missions, offer humanitarian aid.
okay.
But
Well, I think in fairness, you've answered that, and I think at one point you're right on, which is that whoever else is listening to this conversation, I doubt it's going to be Benjamin Netanyahu hanging on the words of what's said in an Irish election campaign. Let's talk about the broader issue of sort of Irish neutrality and defence, because there's clearly, I think, if you look at the sort of I'm not saying this is representative of every Irish soldier, but there's definitely a frustration in the Irish Defence Forces. They feel like they're undermanned. We've obviously a bunch of naval vessels that are mothballed essentially because we don't have crew for them. We've very small military force. The European Union Common Defence and Security Policy, some in the army seem to think will be a way to force the Irish government to invest more in our defence forces. Should we be investing more in them? First of all, number two, Peter Casey told me the other day, frankly, he doesn't believe in neutrality. He thinks we should join NATO and set our defence spending at 2%. Where are you on that?
no, I would absolutely steer clear of NATO. They've got a bad reputation. If my opinion is, if we join NATO, we we're our neutrality is gone completely. I know some people argue that it's gone now already because we're taking sides. But if we join NATO, then we're obliged, right, to take part in conflicts. Um, we're a tiny island. We're, in a unique position, right, in the world to be peace brokers. We've never invaded another country. We've never colonized another country. We're, we're fantastic at at. We've had our own conflicts, right, in this country.
Mhm.
We've been able to maneuver ways to maneuver around that situation and find peace on the island. Um,
The corollary of that, and I hear what you're saying about neutrality. The corollary of that, though, is that you might say we're not in NATO, but obviously you've got the if we need something to be spotted in Irish waters, we're relying on RAF, which is NATO fighters. We if there's a Russian submarine in Irish waters, it's a NATO submarine in our waters that's detecting them. Like, do you think we should be investing in our own capacity as a neutral country to defend ourselves?
yes, yes, we absolutely should invest in our own defense forces, 100%.
Mm.
But joining partnerships like NATO is not the way forward. And I think you would find like the majority of Irish people feel the same way. The people I'm speaking to on the doors anyway, they feel the same way. The issue is right that the Irish government they simply aren't listening. But yeah, but absolutely remain neutral. Um, car alarm going off in the background there.
Sorry.
Remain neutral, but absolutely beef up our defenses and boost our military force
All right.
just in case.
Derek, I'm going to finish the interview with one question that I haven't asked other people, but I haven't asked them because you're the only one to have raised this, and I think it's interesting, and hopefully you'll be able to answer. It's not a difficult question.
Mm.
I saw you tweeting last week, and it comes back to something we were talking about earlier on in the interview that people should vote for you number one, and Michael Leahy number two, and then you said they should stop and go no further.
Yes.
And it just occurs to me, I'm looking at the opinion polls. You're on 4%.
Mm.
If you're going to take this seat, you're going to need number threes, fours, fives from people like Mary Fitzgibbon, Eddie Punch, Michael
Mm.
McNamara, people who may be a little bit more centrist than you are. You might think. I'm not saying they are. You might think on these
Yeah.
issues. Like, and are you not worried some of their voters will go, well, if he's not transferring to us, we're not going to transfer to him. And just tactically on this issue of people voting, I mean, do you really think there's no difference between, say, Eddie Punch of the Independent Ireland group, or your man from Aintu, and a Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael candidate?
Yeah. So the point I was trying to make that day was that you know vote for me number one, vote for Michael Leahy number two. Where I would draw the line would be with the establishment parties: Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, Sinn Féin, the Greens, People Before Profit. These are the parties who have supported the current policies that have brought so much chaos to our lives. So, I don't think it's fair to ask people to fill that ballot sheet right to the bottom and, give Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, Sinn Féin transfers. Right?
Okay.
They've already said that the next elections will be all about transfers, right? They're depending on them. And, I don't think it's fair to ask people to send any support their way.
All right, well, that's very clear. And look, we're just about on 40 minutes, which is about as long as we want these things to go, or else people will start getting bored of me. I don't think they're bored of you, but they'll definitely get bored of me. So we'll leave it there. I just want to say what I say to every candidate at the end of these interviews, which is thanks very much for putting your name on the ballot paper. Whether people agree with Derek, whether they don't agree with Derek, he is investing, I'm quite sure, an immense amount of his time, and I suspect a fair bit of his own money, as are all candidates in this election, going around the time trying to engage people, trying to represent you, trying to put forward a case that their views are in tune with yours. Whether they are or they aren't, that's something to be respected from all candidates. And I think the least people can do is listen to them, get out there and try and cast a vote for somebody at least who represents your views. So, Derek, thanks a million for joining us. We'll be back with another one of these interviews at the end of the week. But from now until then, that's been me, and we'll talk to you again soon. Take care.